There's a cognitive bias called the halo effect. It means that when we believe someone is good in one way, we automatically assume they're good in every way. Smart people fall for it. Experienced investors fall for it. Regulators fall for it. Even the media falls for it. Sam Bankman-Fried understood this, maybe better than anyone alive. He didn't just want you to trust his company. He wanted you to trust his soul. And for a while, it worked perfectly. Then, $8 billion disappeared. Who was this person? And why did everyone trust him? To understand what happened at FTX, you have to start somewhere most people don't start. Not the collapse, not the fraud, not the billions. You have to start with the image, because the image was the whole point. By 2021, Sam Bankman-Fried, most people just called him SBF, was one of the most talked about people in finance. He was in his 20s. He'd already built FTX into one of the largest crypto exchanges in the world. At its peak, the company was valued at around $32 billion. $32 billion. And here's the thing that made everyone pay attention. He didn't look like someone who'd built a $32 billion company. He had messy, frizzy hair he never seemed to brush. He wore cargo shorts to meetings that probably should have required a jacket. He drove a Toyota Corolla. He slept on a beanbag in his office. He played video games during investor calls, not secretly, right there on screen. And every time a journalist asked him about money, he said the same thing. He didn't really care about it. He said he was going to give almost all of it away, every dollar, to the most important causes on Earth: preventing pandemics, reducing the risk of nuclear war, protecting the long-term future of humanity. That's not just a business pitch. That's a moral identity. And here's why it mattered so much. In the world of crypto, which at the time was drowning in obvious scams and anonymous fraudsters, Sam Bankman-Fried was positioned as something completely different. He was the responsible one, the adult in the room. FTX was marketed as the clean, serious, regulated version of crypto. It had celebrity endorsements: Tom Brady, Steph Curry, Gisele Bündchen. It had deals with sports stadiums. It sponsored Formula One. It bought naming rights to the Miami Heat Arena. U.S. senators met with him. He testified before Congress. He talked about sensible regulation. He said all the right things. 1 million ordinary people trusted FTX with their money. Not traders, not hedge funds. Ordinary people who treated it like a savings account. And this is the part that matters. They didn't trust it because it looked fancy. They trusted it because the man running it looked like someone who had no interest in stealing from them. That was the trap. SBF didn't invent his worldview by accident. He had a framework for it. It came from a movement called effective altruism. The basic idea sounds reasonable, even admirable. Don't just be kind, be strategic about it. Use evidence, logic, and data to figure out where your time, money, and attention will do the most good per dollar. And one specific version of that idea, called earn to give, argued that sometimes the best way to help the world is to go into finance, make as much money as humanly possible, and then donate it to the most impactful causes. SBF embraced this completely. But here's where it got complicated and a little dangerous. Within this framework, the future matters enormously, like mathematically enormously. If you can calculate that an action today might save millions of lives over the next century, that number can start to dwarf whatever harm you cause right now. And SBF was obsessed with this kind of calculation. He talked about expected value constantly. He thought in probabilities. He'd openly say that if a bet had even a tiny chance of a massive upside, you should take it, even if the downside was catastrophic. In a philosophy lecture, that's an interesting idea. In a financial company managing billions of dollars of other people's money, that's a completely different thing. Because at some point, the math can start to override everything else. Customer deposits, risk controls, basic accounting, honesty, all of it can start to feel small, even like an obstacle if you've convinced yourself you're playing for the future of civilization. This is what researchers who studied FTX called the math versus reality gap. SBF could calculate enormous future outcomes in his head, but FTX, the actual company with actual customer money in it, couldn't properly track where the money was. And he didn't seem particularly bothered by that, because why would you spend time on accounting when you were trying to save the world? FTX was an exchange. People deposited money, they traded crypto, and if a trader lost too much, the platform would automatically liquidate their position to protect everyone else. That's how every responsible exchange is supposed to work. But SBF also ran a separate company alongside FTX, a trading firm called Alameda Research, and Alameda was not playing by the same rules. According to investigators and court documents, Alameda had been given a special technical feature inside the FTX system, something researchers described as an allow negative setting. It meant Alameda could maintain a massive negative balance. It could withdraw and use funds far beyond what it actually had on deposit. Let that sink in for a second. Every other user on FTX had strict limits. If you ran out of money, you got stopped. You got liquidated. The rules protected you and everyone else from catastrophic losses. Alameda had no such limit. It could go deeply negative, and the system would just let it, because someone had built an exception into the code specifically for them. Now, here's the critical question. If Alameda goes deeply negative, whose money is it using? The only money sitting inside FTX belonged to its customers. So when Alameda's trading bets went wrong, and they did go wrong, the shortfall was quietly being covered by funds that real people had deposited, thinking they were safe. This wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a rounding error. It wasn't even a series of bad decisions that slowly got out of hand. It was a door built into the system that let one company help itself to money it didn't own. And if you're asking yourself right now, who authorized this? Who signed off on a back door that handed customer deposits to a private trading firm? Well, that's the right question, and the answer is not reassuring. The empire looked strong. It wasn't. And then one article changed everything. Here's another layer to this story, because the back door wasn't the only thing holding the illusion together. FTX had created its own cryptocurrency token. It was called FTT. Alameda held a huge amount of it, and this FTT was counted as valuable collateral on Alameda's balance sheet, which made Alameda look wealthy, stable, and solvent. But here's the problem. The value of FTT was almost entirely dependent on confidence in FTX. It wasn't cash, it wasn't gold, it wasn't real estate. It was a token whose price existed because people believed FTX was powerful. And FTX looked powerful, partly because Alameda held so much FTT. The whole thing was circular. The empire was using its own created asset to make itself look richer than it was. And as long as nobody looked too closely, it worked. Until November 2022, a crypto news outlet called CoinDesk published a report. It raised questions about Alameda's balance sheet, about how much of it was FTT, about how real the strength actually was. The CEO of Binance, the world's largest crypto exchange and a major holder of FTT, read that report and publicly announced he was selling everything. That was enough. Within hours, FTX customers started asking for their money back. Not all of them, just enough. A staggering $6 billion in withdrawal requests slammed the platform in just 3 days, and FTX couldn't pay. In a matter of days, one of the most trusted names in crypto had ground to a halt. The company that had spent years telling the world it was the responsible option, the regulated option, the adult option, couldn't cover its own customers because the money wasn't there. When people finally looked inside, they found something worse than fraud. They found nothing. FTX filed for bankruptcy in November 2022. The man brought in to handle the aftermath was John Ray III. He was not a stranger to disasters. He was the restructuring expert who had untangled Enron, at the time considered one of the greatest corporate frauds in American history. He'd seen catastrophic management. He'd seen deliberate deception. He'd seen companies gutted from the inside. He looked inside FTX, and then he said something remarkable. He said he had never, in 40 years of legal and restructuring work, seen anything like this. Not the fraud, the chaos. There were no proper financial records. Customer funds and company funds had been commingled, mixed together so completely that nobody could easily tell which money belonged to whom. Corporate assets had been used for personal purchases. Key decisions had been made by a tiny group of people living together in the Bahamas, many of them in a romantic relationship with each other, with almost no formal governance, no board oversight, no checks. John Ray characterized what he found, bluntly, as old-fashioned embezzlement. Not some sophisticated crypto scheme, not a futuristic algorithmic mystery, embezzlement. SBF was arrested in December 2022. He was charged with wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering. He went to trial in 2023. The jury took less than 5 hours to convict him on all counts. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison. The amount confirmed missing, $8 billion. The number of customers directly affected, over 1 million. Some of those people were sophisticated investors who understood the risks, but many weren't. Many were ordinary people who had treated FTX like a safe place to store savings, who had trusted it because the man running it seemed so genuinely, publicly, exhaustingly committed to doing good. Years later, a bankruptcy court would miraculously claw back billions, proudly announcing that victims would eventually get their money back. But a court cannot refund stolen time. It cannot repay the years of paralyzing stress, the destroyed plans, the shattered families, or the massive market upside they were locked out of. To the systems in charge, the ledger was balanced, but to the people who trusted him, the damage was already done. They didn't get a philosophical debate. They just got a cold, hard lesson in betrayal. FTX was many things: a crypto exchange, a fraud, a management disaster, a courtroom drama. But the most important thing, FTX is a warning. Because the mechanism that made FTX so dangerous wasn't the token, it wasn't the backdoor, it wasn't even the missing money, it was the trust. And specifically, how that trust was manufactured. Think about what SBF actually built. He built a moral identity so convincing that it served as a shield against scrutiny. Every quality that should have made investors ask harder questions, the chaos, the missing controls, the informal governance, the risk-taking, got reframed as personality quirks, evidence of genius, signs of someone too important and too busy saving the world to worry about boring details. The weirdness wasn't a warning, it was a feature. Because if someone looks like a saint, the smell test feels rude. And this isn't unique to SBF. This is a pattern. When someone wraps a financial product, or a political movement, or a company, or an ideology in the language of virtue and sacrifice and saving the world, our usual defenses lower. We don't want to be the cynical one. We don't want to be the person who looked at someone doing good and said, wait a minute. Experienced investors missed it. Regulators missed it. Elite journalists missed it. Some of the smartest people in finance looked at FTX and saw what they were supposed to see: a responsible, innovative company run by an idealistic genius. Because the genius costume was perfectly fitted and the moral mission was perfectly positioned, and nobody wanted to pull at the thread. The research that underpins this video describes FTX as having sold itself as responsible and ethical and future-focused, while basic governance was completely absent behind the scenes. That's not an accident. That's a design. Sam Bankman-Fried wanted the world to see him as proof that capitalism could be hacked for good. Make money, give it away, save the future. But when the mask came off, the story was much simpler than that. Customer money was gone. The genius brand was hollow. The moral mission didn't protect a single person. In fact, it may have done the opposite. It gave people a reason to trust without verifying. It gave them a story that made skepticism feel unkind. It turned the most basic question, where is the money, into something that felt almost rude to ask. That's the real lesson here. Not that crypto is dangerous, though it can be. Not that billionaires are villains, though some are. The real lesson is about what happens when we let someone's moral story do the work that evidence and oversight are supposed to do. The most dangerous fraud doesn't look greedy, it looks idealistic. It arrives wearing a halo, And if you're wondering whether this is the only company that has ever learned that trick, well, that's probably a story worth paying attention to.